All right. Hey, we're joined by Jonnie Allan, the creator of STKMAN. And let me say something before we get started. This is a show to inform you, the other creators in this community, on the trials, the tribulations, what to do, what not to do, and sort of dig into the process a little bit to get you to understand that this is a business, and you're the machine, because you don't have the machine behind you. You don't have the marketing. You don't have the previews. You don't have a way in there until you sort of prove that your product's going to come out regularly. So if you want to do this, we have somebody who's going to share that information. So we're not going to be paying attention in the chat. So if you're saying things, if you have questions, I will look for the questions, but I won't be reading off anything more than a really good question for Jonnie. Just so you understand that the idea behind today's show is for you to learn. And for me to learn, because I want to learn, because I don't necessarily know everything, and I don't think, I don't ever, when I broadcast a show, I always state that I am a constant learner. I love to hear somebody tell me something I don't know. I watch all kinds of YouTube shows on coloring, because I always say I'm a passable colorist, and so I want to get better. So we're going to learn some of those things about indie creating of comics, and we're going to start with a really good question. Jonnie, I really want to know, because you used to do this, right? But there was some light bulb that went off recently. You said, I'm going to do it again. And I want to know that story right now.
Oh, goodness. It was a lot of things. The funny thing is now, I kind of get jazzed about things because people are talking about this character of mine that hasn't been around for 10 years. And that's exciting to me. But people, I would get the occasionally, for a while there, it was at least once a week, what's going on with STKMAN? Is he ever coming back? That kind of thing. And the wheels were always kind of turning and stuff. And it was always one of those things that when you kind of back away from comics, when you're a creative person, you have to keep creating. Okay. You have to find an outlet for that. If you don't, if you try and contain that inside of yourself, you'll go crazy. You'll go bananas, because you need to have an outlet for that creative side of you. Okay. Be it creating music, be it writing, be it sketching, doodling, whatever you can do to get that out, you need to bring that side out. And if you stifle it, again, it's detrimental to your health, and a lot of times you don't even realize what's going on. I was running another business, a marketing business, helping a lot of different businesses with their social media campaigns and their online presence and stuff like that, and even a lot of the direct mail pieces that they would mail out, and was not being fulfilled in that way that the comics always had. That I love the comic book industry. It was so much fun. Even when you're doing independent stuff, like back in the '90s, doing the first independent books, you're still working a regular career and you're drawing through the night trying to get this stuff done because you love it so much. And that's something. Just to touch on real quick, is that this is a career, and it's something that sometimes a page can take you 10, 12, 14 hours. You have to really love what you're doing in order to uh, you know have the fortitude to continue with it, and to, instead of just making one page, then actually make a book of 22 pages, 32 pages, 46 pages, whatever. You have to really want to again, to use the word again, fortitude, to and the tenacity to stay with it, to stick with it, and continue to be creative. But what I started watching now, as my son's getting older, I have a 12-year-old son, and I'm surrounded in my office studio here with, stickman stuff, but also toys and everything having to do with comics. And I love comics, and so I would take him to the comic stores. But what I started seeing more and more is there were very few all ages books out there. Very few. If they had some, there was this tiny little rack off to the corner. Now, when I was a kid, you could go into any 7-Eleven, any spinner rack, and grab any comic that you wanted. You didn't have to worry about the content in there. It was something that all kids could read. And nowadays, or even just in the last 5 to 6 years, you started seeing a shift where you couldn't do that, where you'd go to Free Comic Book Day, and if the retailer was smart, he'd have all the books that were not meant for kids back on a part where they couldn't just readily grab it off the table. And you'd notice there was just fewer and fewer every year. There were fewer and fewer comics that were something that the kids could read. And then pretty soon you find yourself asking, well, what else? What's in this? You know, what it is? You say this is for kids, but that's kind of changed over time. So what's the content in here? And more and more, it was like, well, it's got this, and again, more mature stuff than you want your kids reading. And there was that draw. There was like, you know what? I created this all-ages book that 6-year-olds and 36-year-olds loved, and that all of them can read. And there was no content in there. It was like watching the Looney Tunes cartoons. You know, whereas as a kid you loved them, but you didn't get all the jokes, right? As an adult, you go back and you watch the Looney Tunes cartoons, you're like, oh, I get it now, but you didn't then. There was just a
Right.
mature humor that was put in there that was still entertaining, and it was something that was created for all kids, all ages, kids, you know, uh, adults, and into the grandparents and stuff. They could all read that. So there was the draw, and as I continued to engage with more and more people, I found that they were missing that what was missing in comics was something that was inspired, something that felt like somebody put their heart and soul into it that you see in independent comics. That it's not just, I just want to create comics because they're cool, but I got a story I want to tell, and I'm going to put everything I can into this story, you know, and whether people read it or not, I want people to read it, but I'm going to create this comic. I'm going to create this for me because I got to get this story out of me. And you're not seeing that level of inspiration, if you will, in the mainstream comics. You start seeing that there's this, what seems to be this agenda that they're pushing onto people, no matter how many people that would go to the comic book shops. And I've got 4 of them here in town. One of them had to close up one of his locations because the sales were down. But the people going in there, they just, the stories weren't resonating with them. And that draw right there, and then seeing the level of artwork, you know, honestly, I joke about it, but the artists that Marvel is using right now need to go back
Mhm.
and read the book, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. Okay, because they're not drawing them the Marvel way. They're
Right.
they're boring. They're these stagnant pages. Because, and that was one of the things they used to point out. They would say, you know, this is how everybody else draws it. This is how Marvel does it. Well, Marvel's not
Mm.
like that anymore. They're drawing it like everybody else, kind of thing.
Right. It almost reminds me a little bit of coloring books. I see a lot of coloring book style, like that. There's just an outline, and there's nothing denoting muscle or shapes of a person. It's really just sterile, if that's the right word.
Yeah, that's actually a really good word to use. And you think about how sad that is, because you think about the Disney cartoons and Disney animation and what they're able to accomplish with such simple lines.
Mm.
The faces and the emotions they're able to convey just with simple lines. They don't have all the, you know, the facial lines and the laugh lines and the dimples and things in the face. They're able to do it just with the eyes and with the mouth and the way that the hair moves. So to sit there and say that you know, that we're using simple lines, you could still tell a really good story, but sadly they're not. And that's part of that inspiration. There's no, or they're using what appears to be a lot of 3D models to make their backgrounds and even their characters, and they got and you lose that organic feeling uh, of the comics themselves when you draw something. You know, it's, you know, especially when you're talking about foreshortening, when something's coming at you and stuff like that, to use
Mm.
a model, you lose some of that aspect of the comic book, where you can look at that and you have to make adjustments on the fly to say, you know, if I exaggerate this a little bit more, it's going to look a lot cooler. But you can't do that with,
Right.
and that's why you lose some of that. Or, you know, the simple lines that they're doing, they just, and, you know, well, there's more to it than that, but yeah,
Well,
sad.
yeah, go back to Kirby and Buscema. Those guys foreshortened, but they foreshortened cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They weren't. It wasn't accurate, but it was bombastic. It was bigger than life. It was grandiose, and it was sort of the, what you're talking about, doing it the cool way.
Well, even you go back and you look in the 90s, like the image stuff, and in fact, like, you know, John Malin and drawing a blank, Mark, what they did with Graveyard Shift, they kind of went back and they got that 90s style again.
Right,
And,
right,
you know, when you look at when those guys were standing around, they looked like they were going to break some stuff, just standing there. I
right,
mean,
right.
he had that cool superhero V taper, and that chest was sticking way out, and they just looked like they were going to cause havoc, no matter, even if they were just standing around talking about getting a drink out of the refrigerator.
Yeah.
So, and that's the way Marvel used to be, and that's what comics were so cool about that. You know, you had the buildings that were 3,000 stories high, and the capes that were 300 feet long, and you know the insanity behind a lot of the drawings that made them so cool. That's missing in a lot of the books, and so it was more of a I've got to draw. So back to your original question, I've got to draw, I've got to create, and then I'm seeing what's happening in comics, and then you start seeing this resurgence of what's happening when you have like Ethan Van Sciver and Richard Meyer, and you see all these guys that want to kind of break off and do their own thing, but then they're being attacked politically, and they're
Right.
being attacked in ways that just the vitriol coming from the other side is just unheard of. I mean, or at least from my perspective, it wasn't there 10 years ago in the comic book industry. People would disagree with things that you might believe in, or disagree with the way that you approach things, but you can still have a civil discussion with people. And so you see the attacks with that, and then you see what they're trying to do. This inspiration of trying to bring independent comics out and make comics cool again. That was all. Bring all that together, and that was the impetus of saying, you know what, I got to do this. I've got stories I got to tell. We had talked about before what happened and why the series came to an end. And it's unfortunate. And one thing I forgot to mention on the call is I had retailers that contacted me afterwards saying it's a shame because, had you gotten to issue number four, number five, the series would have probably exploded. Everybody would have. It was hitting all the right notes. It was in a market. It was in this movement. It was all ages. It was something anybody can read. It was very entertaining. But because of the gatekeepers, the series came to an end. And then what I see happen now in wanting to bring it back out and prove that, you know what, we can go around the gatekeepers, the big guys, again, the East Van Skivers and Mike Miller and Rich Meyer and these guys, Benson Maple, and what these guys were able to do, they were able to prove that gatekeepers are relevant. We can take the comics directly to the fans. And that's the exciting part. That's the cool part about the whole thing. And seeing that, they were able to accomplish on their crowdfunding campaigns. You know what? That's a great way to go. I think we can do that too. And that, again, that's like, I'm all in. I'm going to do it. Talked with the family, make sure they were all up for it as far as me getting back into drawing, and working all hours of the day. And big thumbs up from everybody. So let's do it. Son was really excited that I was going to be, the cool dad again, drawing comic books. And yeah, so there you go.
Awesome.
Cool. The next question I want to get into is your process. How does it start? Like, start with like, okay, let's start with the whole new thing where, all right, I'm going to do this again. And I remember you saying on Chester's show, I had a story, but it needed to it needed to evolve. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, okay, so in bringing this out, so we wanted to, and I say we as far as my wife and I. So there's just me on the comic book, but what I wanted to do on the book is trying to approach it as like, okay, well, here I have a story that I was going to continue telling. So it was the next I was going to do, basically I have this issue of a continual series.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't, because there's been such a long gap, I can't really just pick up where I left off before. So I have to sit down and I got to think about it. How can I tell a story that I still need to tell, because I think this is an important chapter in the Stickman. This is going to set up storylines well into the future. So I need to tell this particular issue, but how can I do that, but still make it so, kind of how they used to do comics, where you could anybody could pick up an issue. This is how they used to be. Anybody could grab an issue off a spinner rack, and and everyone was written in a way knowing that it was somebody's first comic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's missing a lot. And I think the independents kind of missed that too. That they need to realize your comic could very well be somebody's very first comic book. Okay. So you got to kind of, how would you approach this? If this was my very first comic book, think of yourself. You're creating the comic because you love the medium. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How would I want to see my very first issue? How would this appeal to me? And you start there. Okay. And then you have a story in place. And then you have to, how can I work this story? How can I work that approach that's accessible to everybody else? Still tell the story I want to tell, but then just kind of weave it all together to where it's something where this could be somebody's first and also their last. So I can tell a fulfilling story that has maybe like a little, stinger, if you will, at the end that makes them want to pick up the next issue. But if they don't, they still feel like they got a very compelling, self-contained story. So you start to, and that's it seems like a monumental task, but it's really not if you just sit down and you focus on how am I going to start plotting out your story. Okay, don't just the mistake that I've seen a lot of independents do is they just start drawing. You're going to get yourself in a trap if you do that. You've got to at least plot it out. Figure out where you're going to go from point A, point B to C to D. Where are you going to end up? And where are the beats in the story? Okay, think about the movies that you love. Think about they've got 3 acts. The movies that don't really resonate with you, usually they're missing an act in there somewhere, or the second act kind of fell flat, or the third didn't really deliver for you.
Right. You're right.
First act, second act, and the third act just kind of fell flat, and the movie just, it just wasn't that great. And that's how you kind of want to think about how can I set up the story, how can I tell the story, and then how can I wrap the story up that's fulfilling for the whole thing. So you got that. So you lay that out, and then you start plotting it out. And you can get to the dialogue as an independent creator, somebody who actually handles every aspect of the book. What I tend to do is I'll plot everything out. I'll write out what I think the dialogue should be. But what happens as you're drawing, things kind of happen organically, and they start changing. Okay, so I write a book that's comedic. Okay,
Right. I drive my writer crazy. Yeah.
what was
I
that?
agree. I drive my writer crazy with these little, I change a scene because I can give it something, and it could be somebody taunting a person or whatever, but it's just something that's not there that I added. And you're right. When you're drawing it out, you go, "Ooh, this character that he's next to right now is interesting," or just it sort of comes to you. Yeah, keep going. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay, but that's a valid point, and that's
Yeah.
that's what happens. That's part of the process, and so it's going to evolve. And like what I was saying is, some of the best jokes that I've come up with, I can't use them. They don't fit in the book. I can't make it work, and then you end up making a mistake because you end up forcing this joke in there, and it's not going to work for you. So you have to be prepared as you're through the creative process to lose some of your best material. You may have to lose that because it's not going to work with the overall story. Don't just try and shoehorn it in there. Okay, because it's just not going to work. Sometimes less is more when you're doing your drawing and you're plotting things out. So what I'll do is I'll plot everything out and I'll write a lot of the dialogue. Sometimes I'll have the complete script, but then again it changes. And then what I begin is kind of a thumbnail process, but it's not really a thumbnail. They're about yay big as far as the size of the page, and I plot out exactly how I'm going to lay out the page. But I'll do 3 or 4 takes on that. And then what inevitably happens is I end up using, ooh, that panel looked cool there. This part looked cool over here. I can add this one in, and then I can combine and kind of, take, a little piece of this, a little piece of that, and kind of tie it all together, and then have the actual page laid out. And then I can take that and then start putting that on 11 by 17. So to just sit down on an 11 by 17 and start drawing on that, I think is a mistake, because you'll get yourself, you won't be able to direct the eye properly with the panels.
Hmm.
It's one of the things that I notice in a lot of independents, especially, and this isn't a knock, but at the level of amateur, when you're working, you're trying to get there, is you're not taking into consideration that we read left to right, top to
Hmm.
bottom, and you need to direct the eye in your panels. If you have your panels and the main character is pointing off, say you get down to the bottom quadrant here and he's pointing off this way, you end up interrupting the flow of the story because your eye leaves the page and ends up trailing off to the left.
Hmm.
Instead of driving, you got to drive the reader back to the right hand side so they can turn the page.
Right.
So kind of you follow this S going left to right, top to bottom as you go along. So that's part of, again, the creative process. How am I going to do this? How am I going to tell this story? And then kind of start plotting it out as far as. And if you're the writer, you can do a lot of. You can help your artist out a lot. So if you have another person that comes in and does the artwork, by doing thumbnail sketches for them, is how you see this page laid out. Doesn't have to be
Hmm.
perfect. You don't have to be the main artist. It's just give them an idea. Use stick figures to convey how how you think the page should work, and then let him use the creative process to him or her, excuse me, the creative process to deliver the end product for you. I hope that answered your
Hmm.
question. feel like I was rambling on that. I'm sorry.
No, but on my show, I talk a ton about eye flow and using, because it doesn't necessarily have to be the character. If you're lighting something a certain way, it can be the backgrounds or the props or the whatever that's sort of, like it doesn't always have to just be the blocking that moves the eye. It can be other things, but they have to be somewhat of the focus of that panel, and sometimes you can do all kinds of different tricks as far as even if you're doing a cityscape where the sides are all in black, but the center's lit, and then you're keeping the person in the center. So if there is another panel underneath there, then you want to do center focus, So
Sure.
so this is something that goes to cinematography or whatever, and there's more than one way to skin the cat in that.
Well, you actually you want to say something, Chester?
Oh no! Hi, Johnny. Nice to see you again.
Good to
I
see you
guess
again.
what I want to say to Todd is always listen to your writer. Go ahead.
Yeah. See, you don't want to know the arguments that I got going on inside my head since I'm the writer and the artist. So
Yeah, no, I can imagine.
yeah. So, but you actually touched on a word as far as a cinematographer, because that's who you are as the artist. You are the cinematographer.
Mm.
So you're going to frame the shot. So you have the director, which is going to be, the writer's going to write it out, and then you're kind of the director and the cinematographer. You're going to frame the shot. Like you said, spotting your blacks is very important. So having the eye, a great use of negative space can help direct the eye too.
Right, balance, negative, positive, right.
Exactly. And I try it, if I ever share that with somebody, they don't really quite understand meaning by negative space. Look at The Last Supper by Da Vinci. Okay, I know they made a whole Da Vinci Code and all that stuff hidden in there, but if you just look at the negative space that's right to the left of Jesus, in doing that, leaving that space there, it draws your eye naturally to Jesus. You're immediately drawn to the center of where he's sitting right there, and that was to be the primary focus of Da Vinci's painting. And it's an
Yeah.
incredible that negative space. And in doing that, think about when you're, don't just try and cram everything into the panel, because you end up putting too much stuff in there and the eye gets confused and lost. You need to have a place for the eye to breathe, and that's where the negative space comes in.
It's a really good point, because again, composition isn't. See, one thing I talked about recently is a lot of indie creators, a lot of indie books, and there was a few that actually did pretty well, but there was zero use of long shots, zero. And the long shot is meant to help show the character, the focal point, and bring you into the environment of the character. So you're using that for suspension of disbelief. Like, he's in the Old West, and the gunman is downrange, and I'm uprange, and we're about to have a duel. You know what? If you just shoot over his shoulder and you see an ear, and then the other gunman downrange, you've just really lost the powerful ability to show that just right. And long shots are important. Every page should actually have a long shot. There's an old rule. Every page should have a long shot. Make sure there's a character on each page that's fully drawn from head to toe, so you see his feet. But some of these rules have gotten so lost, and they're actually written. Larry Hama is one of the ones who created, or Hama, he was one of the ones who created these rules, wrote them out, and they can be found all over. If you do the digging, they're there.
Yeah. With that, the establishing shot, you got to have the establishing shot, and again, watching. You got to remind the reader where they're at. And anytime you change locations, you got to show the reader where it's at. And this is one of the things, with like the CW and their shows and their Arrowverse shows do a fantastic job with this. Every time they change locations, you've got an exterior shot of where they're at. So the viewer now knows, oh, okay, we moved to another spot. And this is missing in comics. You see it in a lot of independent comics. You're thinking you're in one location, but you're in another, because they failed to convey to you that we've moved locations. We're in another place.
Right.
So you can have something that shows, hey, look, we're now here. Even if it's a tiny little shot, tiny little panel in there, or you don't need to leave it up to the writer to say, back at such and such, show it. You know, even if it's the interior of a place that you've been before, at least you now know you're in a different location. And that's where that long shot and that establishing shot, those two can be one and the same, but just remind the reader that we moved to another location.
One of the other questions I wanted to ask is, you did comics before. You did about 3 issues. You have this idea. I'm going to do this again, and you still, even though, I mean, there's always, when it comes to all ages, there's always different roads you can take. But you took comics again because of your love and passion. But why did you not take a sort of landscape size children's books or scholastic type things and try a different route with Stickman? Is it just your passion for comics, or is there another reason that you looked into and you decided, you know what, I think it's still comics?
Well, honestly, this is one of the things I have always wanted to see this character animated. Okay, so I would love to take him in that direction, but I knew because I grew up in Southern California, and I actually did a lot of television shows in the late '90s, and actually mostly in the late '90s, and I knew how Hollywood would change something. So if you give a property to them and they're interested in it, then they want to put their own stamp on it and their own spin, and so they want to change it. And so the reason why I brought Stickman out in comic books is because I had a certain way I wanted him to look and feel and flow, and I wanted to build up an audience with the character first before I started approaching and possibly getting him animated at one time. But why I chose to go in on children's book, because this is a comic book. It's, you know, the thing that I love about comics is the mixed medium, if you will. You've got the story, but you also have the visuals, and you combine the two together, and that's what creates the comic book itself. It's not just the dialogue or just the copy that's not just the artwork. And this is what's missing in a lot of the mainstream comics now. I mean, they're just, we talked earlier about how the art on a lot of it is just subpar. And so you have all this copy that you're reading, and the artwork is so boring or so bland, and the colors don't jump off the page anymore. There's nothing dynamic about it. And they're forgetting that it's the two coming together that makes comics so cool. And so here you've got this character that, yeah, there's some things that I would love to see, just the movement part of it, you know, the guy's eyes are held on my string, and him, you know, cruising down the street on a souped up big wheel. I would love to see that animated. That'd just be so cool. But doing it in comics, again, it's because of that love. I loved comics since I was a kid, had a huge collection. Not because I meant to have a collection, it's just because I read comics all the time. And again, as a kid, you didn't have the local comic book shops. Those didn't really start coming on the scene until the '80s. So you could only get your comics from the 7-Eleven or the corner drugstore and stuff. And so you're reading all these comics, and it's that love of combining the two and being able to, you know, show the character the way that you want it, through the lighting, through the colors, and then tell the story as well in something that people can hold and enjoy over and over again, if that makes sense. So
No, it
it's
makes
just the
perfect
love
sense.
of the medium itself of comics that I just think are so cool, and the stuff that I loved about it growing up that seems to be missing from comics is again what drove me back into it. So, and to want to bring this guy back out. So you're right. I could have gone the route of a children's book, but I don't think it would have had the same flavor. You know, because it's not just the character of Stickman; it's the whole world around him. And in the children's book, you know, you're kind of limited as far as I've done some work for other children's books, and you're limited in the images that you're able to put inside those books, and so you can't really convey everything that you want to and build this world around it like you can. At least I felt I was limited by that. Probably stepped on a few children's books creators' toes, but
But you're
just
right.
creating that world around it. So.
There's a movement that happens in the panels, and then there's a movement that, like Scott McCloud talks about, that happens within the gutters. And children's books don't really have that. They sort of have moments,
Yeah.
and then a lot of narration or story or
Yeah, they're
whatever.
snapshots basically. So
Right.
it's a snapshot of what's taking place here, and you don't get that, you know, with comics. With comics, you're able to you know, like I had mentioned to you guys before, I love hiding stuff in the background of the
Mm.
comics and putting stuff and making people slow down and read the comic and take a look at all the stuff that's in the background and everything. And, just kind of a spoiler alert, in the next issue, I've got, the Little Rascals clubhouse, the He-Man Woman Haters Club, tucked in the background in one of the scenes.
Yeah.
Just little things
That's
like that, so
essential.
that people can go through and say, "Oh man, that's really kind of cool. I like that." And again, to get people to slow down, take your time, enjoy the art, really enjoy the art, and process the art, and
Right.
just take a breath, because I just spent, well, if you factor in the art, so you got the penciling, which can be anywhere from 10 to 14 hours. Then you get the inking on top of that. Now, I wish I could be like Ethan Van Sciver and go straight to ink. I'm just not that talented. So go pencils to inks, then the flats for the colors, then you have the coloring itself, then you got the lettering. I've now seen the page 5 times. So I want you to take your time when you read that thing. So
let's go back a little bit, because we talked about laying out the story, plotting, and you even started to go into thumbnails, right? So you get your thumbnails together, some jokes come to you, you start to change a few things. Now you're penciling. Now, are you traditional? Are you digital? Talk a little bit about your process.
no, I'm still traditional, even though I have a lot of people, especially when I started getting back into and announcing I was going to bring the book out, a lot of people were telling me that I need to go digital. And I love the traditional part of it. I mean, I've got, let's see if, excuse me, let me see if I can grab a page here real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So here's an actual page of the new comic.
Ooh.
Okay, so this is 11 by
very
17.
cool.
This is it's graphite and then Indie ink on top of it, and it's a lot of different things as far as brush, crow quill, repeated graph for the fine lines and stuff like that. So that's how I like working, and then reducing everything down.
So is your pencils are real tight, so that you sort of eliminate any errors that might happen when you ink? You make sure you've figured it out and everything looks right and everything's proportioned right. Because I used to have a problem. That's kind of why I went digital. When I would ink, I would look at the pencils and everything would look all right, and then I'd go to ink and I'd go, oh, I made one bad line or two bad lines and this, and I just didn't know my way out of it at the time, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, the good thing now, if you do something like that, is you can correct that digitally when you get into the coloring stage. There's a couple things that you can make adjustments and stuff, like maybe your
Right.
color you may not know, but if you go into and you drop it into Photoshop, and you can make those adjustments too. But my pencils are very tight. They look, actually, the ink is, the pencils are as clean as you could possibly get.
Hmm.
For the very reason, what I found, excuse me, is that I was cutting corners. If I didn't make everything as tight as possible, you start thinking, okay, and because you do all the stages in the book, it's like, okay, I can make that up in the inking stage. And then pretty soon I can make that up in the coloring stage. And I found that the artwork suffers when you do that. And I've never tried my hand at the digital drawing. I still use a Wacom tablet, not a monitor to draw on. So I don't have like a Cintiq or anything. So I still use the stare at the monitor while coloring off to the side and stuff.
Oh, wow. So
Uh,
you're coloring with a mouse.
Not with a mouse. I'm using a, like
Oh, like an Intuos or something like that?
so I think
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
yeah, an Intuos 2 or something like that. So,
Right.
I'm still using the but that's how I did the comic before, and that's why everybody's, oh no, you got to get a Cintiq or a Coolios or whatever the new, or a Julian or the new
Yeah,
tab
yeah.
out there. You got to do it that way, and it'll change everything. And I don't doubt that, but I guess I'm kind of a creature of habit in doing that. So the artwork is done until I'm satisfied with the way that the pencils look. I don't move on to start inking it.
Mm.
So that has to be tight and clean, and all the detail has to be there. And then sometimes I'll get in there with the ink. And then with the inking, sometimes in the pencils, I can't really, the spot blacks, putting that in there, it's not really working in the pencils. And I will end up changing those kind of things, like any inker would. A really good inker would get in there and find areas where the spot blacks would make that this particular part of the drawing stand out a lot more if we just, put more of, again, the negative and the positive and those kind of things, and bring it all together in that panel, if you know what I mean on that. So
Right.
every stage is as tight as can possibly be. Even, in the coloring, when I lay the flats in there, I use the actual colors of those pieces. Like a lot of people, they do the flats, they just use, a bunch of different colors because it makes it easy for them to
To
select. But
grab, right.
Yeah, I actually use the colors of the characters and what they're going to be before I actually do all the embellishing on that. So again, everything just so I can continue to visualize it and I can see it. And if I don't do it that way, I find that the artwork suffers because you end up cutting corners. So it's kind of think about this. I think like in the prequels, like with George Lucas when we did the prequel Star Wars, I think a lot of those movies suffered because it was kind of like, well, we can make that up in post. You know, we can fix that in post kind of thing.
Right.
When you did it practically in the 70s, you had to get it right now. You know, let's get it right, let's get it tight, let's get it dialed in, and we'll add the effects later. And I think from my opinion, it looks like he's just like, well, you know, that's going to work. Not the best directed, but we can fix it in post. And I think that's why the movies were kind of lackluster. And again, I probably just offended a bunch of people. But
Now,
nowhere near as bad when I was sitting on a panel one time and I admitted that I had never read Watchmen. I thought they were going to take me out and stone me that day. I was just
Watchmen was, you know what? I didn't read it until I was an adult either, because Watchmen was really word heavy.
Yeah.
And and I was so used to spending half an hour with a comic, if that, and that was part of the enjoyment of it. Like I had so many that I was just going through them all the time. But Watchmen was like, man, I needed a better intellect, I felt like, to be able to read this because it's so wordy,
It's like something you would see on your required reading list at school. It's like, oh, I can't read this. I don't want to. So no, it just wasn't anything that I don't know. It just didn't. It didn't. It wasn't anything that grabbed me that I said I had to read that. And then I just never got around to reading it. But yeah, the gasp in the audience was, oh, you have read Watchmen.
Yeah, right. So do these guys? I wonder if these guys have any questions so far where we're at in the process of how you do this. If they have anything they'd like to ask.
You talk about us, or you talk about the chat?
No, that you guys. No, I've told the chat that we're really going to try to conduct an interview. If there's a really good question, I'll find it and I'll ask it. But I'm wondering if you guys have.
Well, no, I'm just enjoying hearing all the knowledge coming out of Jonnie here. I think it's really cool. I love seeing the art. You could show more of that if you'd like. I would like to see more because it's great, great looking artwork. I love this project. If you guys in the chat haven't checked it out, go over and check out STKMAN on Indiegogo. It's a great looking project.
There you go. There's another one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's very nice, very professional.
General Sod the Dirt Clod.
That's right. I remember his name was Sod. Yeah, and it's sort of a wordplay, and I like that.
Fun on the kneel before Zod kind of thing. So kneel before Sod, but
yeah,
the one thing I try and stay away from in the comic is parody, because it's really easy to devolve into parody when you're writing comedy, and I really don't want to do that. But if I can take something from some of the the pop culture and stuff like that and kind of twist it just a little bit and use it for the character, that's and that's a tip for people that are trying to be creative. You don't have to necessarily copy, but you can find the stuff that you love that influences you and just put a twist on it. Find a way that you can bring your own approach. I mean, I said before that STKMAN is not a novel idea of this bumbling buffoon who somehow still managed to save the day. I mean, the lead up to that, in the tradition of the Tick, in honor of Hong Kong memory, buffoon, and Cervantes, with, trying to wrestle a tornado with Don Quixote. I mean, you can go back as far, but it's how can you put a new twist on this? How can you tell a similar story? Even if you have a hero that's as strong and powerful. I mean, look at this. One of my closest friends is Kevin Grevious. He's the writer of Underworld. And, the big scary black werewolf race.
Right.
And you look at what he did, and this is inspiration for everybody, what he did with the Blue Marvel, with that character. So instead of trying to take an established character, he created a brand new character that is now part of the Marvel lore, and in fact showed up in my son's Lego video game playing as the Blue Marvel.
Wow.
He took an interesting idea of an overpowered hero and again put a twist on it, something that resonated with fans. I think it was a 6-issue miniseries, but he ended up being weaved into Marvel lore, and he pops up occasionally in some of the different intellectual properties of theirs. And so you can do that. So you have characters. So if you create like a superhero, you know, even the Image guys, they did this. They borrowed a lot of ideas from the existing comic. I mean, goodness, you know, look at and
Oh
I
my
know
God.
kill me for saying it, but look at, you know, Deadpool and
Deadpool.
I mean,
Yeah.
you
Right.
know, ripping off the other, plain and simple. Until Joe
Right.
Kelly got a hold of it, and he did a brilliant run on Deadpool, and it was absolutely hysterical. But
Yeah.
you know,
There was something that, hey, John, this is DeWolf. There was something that you had said kind of like way earlier, talking about the new way that's going on, and they're not creative. And there's something that you also said just now recently, which was take something and build on it. And I think something that's missing possibly in here, and maybe you can expound on this, that I believe in, is that there's a lack of knowledge. You have to know things. You have to know things about the world, about history, and certain things, so that you can actually have a bank of information to draw out of in order to create. And I think that is almost being lost, especially with today's teaching and education system.
Well, that's a can of worms that you're going to open up there. That you're absolutely right on that. So I mean, you know, it just to, you know, if it means that, you know, to where I stand on those issues, our son was homeschooled. So, you know, I agree with you 100% as far as what's happening. I think you're right. I mean, that's one of the things that young creative people, and not to knock them at all, but when you're 18, when you're 21, you don't have that many life experiences. I mean, at 21, I had already been in the military. I'd been around the world. I've seen things that, you know, most people hadn't experienced by that time. So there was a level of maturity and you know, life experience there, but still nowhere near what you come across when you turn 30, when you turn 40. You know, like, you know, I just celebrated my 40-10 birthday. So, you know, it's you have a lot that you can draw on. Now, if you're younger, you're absolutely right. You can go back to, you know, nowadays, I mean, you don't have encyclopedias, but you've got it online. You can go research all this stuff and you can read about it. And I'm not talking about just Wikipedia. Do some research and learn more. Like if you're going to write a story about the Old West, learn about the Old West. Learn about what it was like. You know, there are some good movies. Don't just base your knowledge on the Old West on Tombstone with Kurt Russell. You know, I mean, it's, you know, but, you know, there's some accuracy in there. If you want a better story about Wyatt Earp, look at the one that Kevin Costner did. That's probably a better story with Wyatt Earp, a little more accurate and stuff. But watch learn more about the Old West and then bring that stuff in there. And if you have the opportunity, I remember in the 90s when I first had the opportunity to do research on the internet. It's still kind of a new thing. You got the dial-up, you know, AOL, all that kind of stuff. And I had a conversation with somebody about something I was working on about cold fusion on the other side of the world. And he was a physicist who just happened to know. I mean, it was an amazing moment for me to talk to somebody who actually had this experience of working in there and getting real world experience of what cold fusion, what theoretically is, and what they're trying to accomplish. And you can still do that. You can tap into it. You can find all this information. So, like this conversation here, you know, you're learning about what it's like from the inside to creating comics from one person's perspective, and the other people in the group, and how they approach things differently. Use that knowledge, and then find that information out there. So, if you want to tell a story about superheroes, go back and read Scott McCloud's book on comics, understanding comics. That'll give you a better insight on, you know, better than anything. You really go back and read How to Draw Comics and Marvel Day, like we talked about before, Todd. You know, that's something that the Marvel artists need to go back and read right now. They need to take a look at that stuff. But read these books that are out there to learn about comics, how comics are told, what the medium actually is. Joe Kubert's got a great book out on comics. Read his book. I mean, the man's got the Kubert School of Visual Arts. I mean, I think the man knows a thing or two about creating comics. And then the genre that you want to get into, do some research, and you're absolutely right. You know, I think you said it, DeWolf. Is that what you said?
DeWolf.
Yes, that's correct.
So, you know, and don't just base it on the information that you've learned in school, because I don't think you learned it correctly. Go and do a little more research. You know, and it sounds like the panel all agrees with me there. So I don't think you
Yes.
The
Oh no, I've been harping on that for quite a while, dude. These, particularly at Marvel and other places, they're not researching anything at all, and they'll get in and they'll talk about high science ideals and concepts, and they have no clue what they're talking about at all. And even a cursory search will allow you to have better knowledge than what has been put out, and it's very frustrating that we have these, Marvel. I mean, it's Marvel, right? And they're not researching anything, and it's just this is not how you do your job. It's very simple.
and I think that's a great point. I think that's missing. I mean, just from my own experience, the first issue of my comic, the villain he's the Jolly Roger, the head of the Jolly Roger Candy Corporation. I actually did research on running a candy corporation so that I could get into this character's head a little bit more. And then I started looking into celebrity status and stuff and how people, and you get into writing the backstory of this character. And this guy, he gets sent to prison, but he never stays in prison long because the candy suffers when he's in prison. So we got to let him out so we can, we can get the candy going again. So it's not just the candy. He makes candy and he makes the donuts that the police eat, the Jolly Jellies, he makes Jolly Juice. I mean, it's just, so you try and figure out all this stuff about how you can get into, and this is an important key. When you're writing your characters, you got to know the backstory. You may never tell that backstory, but you got to know it. You got to know everything about that character. You got to flesh that character out so you can get in that character's head. Otherwise, they just end up very one-dimensional.
Right.
And you got to have something that, again, I'm writing comedy, so I put a comedic twist on it, but what motivates them? What gets them out of bed in the morning? What makes them, the thing with, one of the biggest questions, like speaking about the Jolly Roger, in the first one, he's trying to get a hold of the ancient Aztec recipe of the gumdrop, and he can't have it. And everybody used to come, and I don't ever explain it really. It's just he's trying to get it again. And so, the police are trying to stop him from stealing this, but he filed a restraining order against the police. And so while they're trying to sort all this stuff out, is this legal? We're going to do, and he's entertaining the crowd, while the police have him cordoned off, he's firing T-shirts off into the crowd and stuff like that. And just nonsense that goes on with celebrities these days and how the police kind of treat celebrity status. And I never get into why. And people come up and say, why can't he have, he's a candy maker. Why can't he have it? I'm like, hey, well, the Aztec culture isn't around anymore. You ever think about that? Maybe it's got something to do with the gumdrop. I know what the reason is. I know, and one day I will tell that story. But for now, if I didn't know what that was, I wouldn't really get into the motivation of the character. I wouldn't be able to bring that across. And even though we don't ever get into it, we don't ever address that. We will one day, or we may not. It's like the origin of Stickman. Where did he come from? I know the story, and my son's still trying to get it out of me. I'm like, I'm not telling you. I'm going to tell that. So, but that's part of the storytelling. And again, that's going to help you as an artist too, because if the writer is going to be able to put that together for you, you're going to be able to, in your artwork, create. So like, say, a particular character, you're going to be able to create a certain swagger or a stance or an attitude that they have if you understand the backstory of the character a little bit more. And I think when you're saying the research with the Marvel artists and the story writers right now, they're not going back and reading what made these characters great.
Yeah.
All they want to do is change them, it looks like, and they want to make them into something that they think would be great, which I don't even think, most of the time from what I can see, they don't even know what great is. It makes me wonder if you can read comics. But
yeah, it's obvious.
Greats did, with just some incredible storytelling and what made these characters last as long as they have. And then you'll understand them a little better, and you can create a better comic book and more compelling. And then, do a little research on, what science is, instead of just trying to come up with something that just doesn't work,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm glad I'm not alone on this one.
So,
No, I mean, I remember always thinking that, man, I got my science degree from Fantastic Four, from John Byrne, who was writing really heavy science. And these were words I wasn't, as a kid, I wouldn't have come across unless I had read them here. I just wouldn't have seen them. And I call that comic book science, But he really tried to bring some heavy science in there, and it never put too much weight on the book. I always thought, man, this is great.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what. Sorry if I just cut somebody off there, but look at what they did with the Doctor Strange movie. And they brought in technical advisors in what was it that like the quantum mechanics and the manipulation of light, and to understand that, to help them better explain a movie that I didn't think they were going to be able to pull off without just nothing but mysticism and craziness, but they actually grounded it, and they did a really good job. Unfortunately, they're not doing that. I haven't read Doctor Strange, but they're not doing that in comics now. They're not grounding it with reality because they're not really paying attention to reality. They're not paying attention, like you said, doing the research, Chester, on and the science. I mean, that's a good comic when you got to read it alongside a science textbook just to figure out the stuff they're talking about. That's a good comic.
Sure is. Yeah. No, it's more than just not doing the research. They're not doing. They're not reading the characters that they're writing. It's obvious they have no clue who the character is. And these days in the book, they pretty much all they have to do is say, "I love science," and that's good enough. And no, it's not good enough, but that's what they think. It's just, this is. I know there's a lot of other things that could be complained about what's going on in modern comic books, but this is something that frustrates me to no end.
So, do you see indie creators the opportunity that you have here? I mean, this is an amazing opportunity that Marvel has done such a great job of digging themselves in the hole. And actually, I think it was in the new Incredibles movie, The Incredibles 2, where he said, you want to get out of a hole, you got to put down the shovel. So you got to stop digging yourself in the hole. And the independents have that opportunity to kind of step up and say, you know what, I'm going to tell a really cool story. I'm going to put my heart, like I mentioned earlier, put your heart and soul on every page. And in this story, I'm going to do a little bit of research. I'm going to make this sound as believable as possible instead of, what is Richard Meyer, your boy Zach, or whatever. I wub the science. Isn't that what I think how he puts it when he reads through the books? It's like they just wub the science. It's just, and you remember reading those books, and Reed Richards read intelligent when you were reading his dialogue, because they took the time, and it doesn't take that long. And now again, remember, you're talking about a day before the internet, before you actually had this amazing wealth of information at the tip of your fingers. So there's no excuse not to do really good, to put the time in to tell a really good story and to do the research properly, to tell a really good story. I can't think of another way to put that. So
no, you put it succinctly, I think.
Cool.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about like the previous incarnation that you did, and any have there been any new pitfalls? You've had some. Then you talked a little bit about that, but we want to miss the pitfalls. So guide us like a parent. What are some of the pitfalls? What are some of the things we should watch out for? What are some of the things you better know your stuff on this before you venture this direction, and give us some of that stuff?
Well, the biggest one right now is going to be on the crowdfunding side of it, the crowdfunding campaign. I spent months researching how to do the crowdfunding campaign properly, and I read several books. I think there's a website out there. I think it's Stonemaier Games, and he's documented everything that he's done for crowdfunding on Indiegogo, or not Indiegogo, Kickstarter. Now he does board games, but a lot of that is still applicable to comics. One thing with the crowdfunding part, and everybody would say this: when you think you're prepared, you're not. Okay, so there are a lot of things we were. The biggest thing is ran into a couple of technological glitches the very first day when we ended up launching the campaign. It was not good. It was kind of ugly that first day. But that would be the biggest thing, is to make sure. Now, truth be told, I probably could have waited 3 to 6 months before I launched this campaign, and built up another audience. Now, I've got a lot of connections still from the comic book industry. In fact, Facebook, people used to send me friend requests all the time. I don't think they were trying to be my friend. I think they just wanted to get to the people I knew on Facebook, try and connect with them. So I have a list, and from the past incarnation, I have an email list and stuff that, sending that stuff out and contacting those people. But the best thing that you can do right now is start building your audience. Start sharing your work. Start collecting email addresses. It's not hard to set up an opt-in form on a web page. okay, where you can start collecting email addresses, start a YouTube channel if you want, and start showing your artwork, showing your process. Get people interested in what you're doing, so when the time comes when you launch it, when you're going to bring your stuff out, you'll have that established audience. So when you hit the go button, you'll have the people rushing the campaign and funding that campaign for you to get it going. I always anticipated that it was going to be really slow for me in the beginning, and had planned out marketing campaigns and stuff like that to get going, which is the way it was in the comic book world before. It was just a little different because we didn't really have social media, or we didn't have social media available to us. So the marketing was done in a more traditional way. And we can get to that too, because those techniques do apply even on social media. So even the old ways that you used to be able to do it, it just doesn't cost nearly as much, and it's a lot easier to reach more people. But that's the biggest pitfall, is just basically um, learning all that you can. Here's the thing I really want to stress to any independent creators who hear this, who are going to look at the success that, say, like Ethan Van Sciver had, and Mike Miller, and Doug Knaple, and Richard Meyer, they had on the crowdfunding campaign. Don't count on that. Okay? Don't count on raising that much money for your comic book. It could happen, but don't count on it. And don't rely on them to promote your book. Okay? Don't rely on anybody else to promote your book for you. It's up to you. You got to get it out there. Okay? If they choose to mention you, to give you some time on air, if they choose to stand behind you, that's great, but don't count on it. Okay, a lot of their sales, and I'm not knocking their talent at all, but a lot of the sales, especially for like Ethan and Richard, a lot of them came from the so you had a lot of people that were funneling in, especially when it gets out, Trump supporters, and they're like, they voted for Trump and they're being attacked for voting for Trump. I'm going to buy their book. That's not cool. I'm going to stand behind that. So I'm not saying all, I'm not saying a huge percentage, but you did have that of people backing the campaigns because of that. So controversy sells. Okay. So don't rely on that kind of stuff. Okay. And don't look to anybody else as far as look at their level of quote unquote success, because success is different from everybody. Just focus on your own stuff. So the biggest pitfall right now is thinking I knew everything. I didn't know everything, but I knew enough to really move forward with the campaign. But I liken it to a convention. The first time you do a convention, you think you're ready. You're not. Okay. There's no way you're ready. Okay. And you learn so much at the convention. Just like when you do your crowdfunding campaign, don't spend a year researching how to do a campaign. Learn as much as you can and then pull the trigger, because you're going to learn a lot more in the middle of the campaign. Okay. You learn by doing, and you got to get this stuff out there. Okay. And this will allow me to touch on something that's really important. I know it started off with me talking about the pitfalls, but this is something I see a lot of independent creators that are still stuck in and I don't mean this in the pejorative, in the wannabe status. They want to get their book out there. They want to, they want to be on the other side of the table at the convention instead of standing there getting the autograph for the sketch. Do it. Get your comic out there. Tomorrow will never come. You're going to keep kicking that can down the road. I'm going to do my comic tomorrow. I'm going to do it tomorrow. It's never going to happen. I know plenty of people that I met 12 years ago that were so excited to get their comic going, and they still haven't gotten it off the show. It still isn't out there. They still haven't even completed more than a page or two. And they keep talking about doing that. So one of the secrets to make that happen is commit to doing a show, a convention, even if it's a small show. Okay. Get yourself a table at the small show. If it's a small local show, a lot of times the people that are organizing the show, they'll give you the table for free because they want to fill those tables with creators, especially local creators. And if it's not free, it's going to be cheap. It's going to be anywhere from $20 to $50 to get a table there. Okay. I would prefer that you find a show that's going to charge you for that table. Okay. Stop thinking about Comic-Con. Comic-Con, everybody wants to play in the Super Bowl. You don't want to do Comic-Con. Okay. Especially if it's your first show. First of all, there's a long waiting list, but even if you were managed to get through, your booth is going to cost you a minimum of $2,000. Don't bother with it. Okay. And besides, there's too many people there and there's too much stuff going on. They will not see your stuff. Okay. So do a local show. Start with that. But spend the money. Make sure there's an invested interest there. So you spent the money. Now you got to get it done. Okay. Now you got to get your book done. Otherwise, you're going to show up at this show. You're going to be a no-show, or you're going to show up and you've got nothing to give away. Nothing to give away, nothing to sell, nothing. Okay. So now you got something driving you and pushing you forward because you've got, again, an invested interest in it. You put money down. Now you got to make it happen. Okay. And that is, believe me, that is motivating. Okay. The the first time I brought, now this, remember, this is back in 2005, so Comic Con was different back then. I brought Stickman out at Comic Con then. I did not. The first book is missing the last 5 pages of the book because I could not get them done in time to get them to the printer, so I would have copies in time for Comic Con. Okay, but I was still able to end the comic, but it ended a little bit different. But I left those off. But again, there's that motivating factor. It's like, well, I can't get this done, so I better not finish my book. No, wrong. I got money down on this table. I got Comic Con. I got a space there. I got to get this done. And believe me, it's going to motivate you. It's going to drive you to produce your product. Will it be the best? No. But done is better than perfect. Okay? You can learn from that. Get your stuff out there. Get it before the fan base. See what they say. There's something so satisfying about having your first comic in your hand. It's done. Whether anybody else sees it or not, it's like, oh, I did it. And you're walking around going, oh, I got it. You know, something that you want. Because I tell you, that feeling of having that comic is so much better than, I wonder what would have happened if. Trust me. Okay? So
you're absolutely right, because my very first comic I was able to bring to my mother's post-op, you know, even though it was like I had to ask for it, even though it was months after it had come out. I said, hey, did you guys realize I still haven't got my comp copies? Oh, no, we'll get them right out. But they came in time for me to bring to my mother's post-op.
oh,
And that to me meant the world, you know, because I was letting her know, you know, through the trials and tribulations, I always wanted to do this, and I did it. And a thing happened, but I did do that, and I'm very lucky and happy that I got to do that, because that's, to me, that's, you know, key was not trying to create a situation where I want you to be proud of me. Was I'm proud to be your son, and I always wanted to do this, and I did this. See, I did it. You know, so it was whatever she felt was obligatory. It wasn't really part of it. It was, I needed to show you that I could, you know.
And that's powerful. That's awesome. But, you know, you're a parent. You know exactly what she was feeling.
Absolutely.
You accomplished something that you said that you were going to do. And regardless of, believe me, I grew up in a household where it was like, oh, you want to draw comics? Well, you know, I mean, you got to have a career now. You know, you want to do that other thing. But, you know, so, you know, and it was funny. I remember being at Comic-Con and NBC had come by and they were interviewing me, and my mom just happened to be there that day. And they never really came down to the show, but they happened to be there that day, and she's just beaming behind me. And, you know, the reporter's like, you know, so I bet you always saw this coming. You're really proud of him. And so it's like, oh yeah, we stood behind him the whole time. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, you know, Nicolas Cage in The Family Guy, when the little girl's like, you know, they did a good job, you know, the aliens, they did a good job when they replaced you, because that's not the woman I grew up with. You know, it's like, you know, but you know, oh man, again, train left me standing in the station, just waving on it goodbye. Anyways, what you said about your mom, that's awesome, and being proud that moment. So even though my parents were not necessarily behind me on that, when the comic was done, they were excited about that. And believe it or not, they're really excited about getting back into comics too, because they know how important it is. And this is a lesson for you know, for anybody out there to think that you might be too late. Like I said, I'm 40-10 now. I'm coming back into comics, and I'm going to play with everybody again. Whether you'll have me or not, I'm coming to play. And, you know, it's not too late. It's only too late if you let it be too late. Okay. You know, don't just sit back. You know, I've got a buddy, breaks my heart. Unfortunately, he injured himself in the military years later. We spent time in the military, and he is one of the most talented people I have ever met. An incredible singing voice, incredible dancer. He can emulate any cartoon character's voice, or at least he could. But when he went back in the military years later, he ended up injuring himself. And now, unfortunately, he doesn't quite have the mental capacity to do that. He never pursued those things, which he should have. I mean, the man, he was a regular Mel Blanc. The guy could do any cartoon character. And it's sad to see, and I know he's kind of brokenhearted about that. He knows that he's at a point now where he may not be able to ever do something with those talents that he has. And it's kind of like, you know, none of us are guaranteed tomorrow. None of us are promised that we're going to be able to do anything with our talents, but we should at least try. And I want to encourage everybody to do something and get the stuff out there, make it happen. The world is darker without your inspiration. We need it. We just lost one of the greatest storytellers, one of the most creative people, Stan Lee.
That's
And
right.
the world's a little bit darker for it. We need you. Maybe you're the next Stan Lee. Maybe you've got the most incredible stories that need to be told. You know, I'm just drawing a book about stick figures. I can't really change the world with that, but maybe you can.
I got a question for you, Johnny.
Yes.
Are you my long lost twin?
We look alike, don't we?
Yeah, well, but actually, you're saying exactly what I've been saying for a long time. All the
Really?
stuff you're going on about, I've been harping on this over and over and over. So thank you very much, dude.
Oh, you're welcome, man. Well, it's nice to meet a kindred spirit.
Yeah.
I have always wanted to encourage. You know, one of my highlights at the conventions, and especially San Diego, is when parents would come on with their kids that were, you know, 10, 12 years old and want me to look at their portfolio. And that was so awesome to see, and see the parents behind the kids and really inspire them and encourage them to go, you know, go forward and you know, and help encourage those kids to pursue what they love. I mean, I got a drawing, I think when I was 10 years old, by Raul Partha, the guy who used to design a lot of the Dungeons and Dragons figures and the drawings and stuff like that. And it was a drawing of a wizard. And it just, I was so excited and stoked by that. And that's what kind of made me want to keep creating, or made me want to be a creator, or made me want to draw comics, because this drawing that he did for me and he signed to me. And in fact, I have another one that is even more cherished, and that was done by Don Bluth. Don Bluth did a drawing for me. And
Wow.
the daring with his sword. And it was a chance meeting with Don Bluth at Comic-Con, and we got to talking, and I had attended Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, and he was going up the following weekend to teach a class, and he asked me what I thought of it, and I said, you know, honestly, it felt like the teachers were there doing community service. It didn't feel like they really wanted to be there. And he looked at me and he was like, that's it. That's what I was trying to, I couldn't put my finger on it, but that's it. And then he just turned around, he grabbed a piece of animation paper and did a drawing and worked the daring for me real quick and handed it to me. And I was walking away like Indiana Jones. I was like, oh.
Right. That's cool, dude.
Now, at your peak, at your best, knowing your lively, you know, what you do in your life and stuff, what would be the most issues that you could produce? Being the you're doing everything, you do it all. What would be the most you could produce in a year?
Well, like right now, what I'd like to be able to do is 4. To, you know, without sacrificing any quantity or quality, excuse me. I think next year, because of all the you know, the learning factor and getting back into it and kind of relearning, you know, it's funny, I had to break out my notes from coloring from the 90s, you know, on how to set up the stuff. It just, in fact, I put out on Twitter, it wasn't that long ago, I sat down to start drawing Stickman again, and I had to pull out reference to draw my own character. I mean, how sad is that? I mean, so I think next year will probably be 3 books, and after that we'll probably do 4. You know, if I try and go any faster, it's good. I think the quality will suffer. And really, I already had, this next issue was already done. I went and looked it up. I think I had through 8 in the can ready to go forward with so, you know, with Diamond and all the stuff that happened with them. And so we were all the way to, we were going to go through 5, then we're going to do a trade, collect all the editions together, and then we were going to do the other issues. But because I went back and because issue number 4 was, I think it was 28 pages. And now it's 48 pages. So I redid the story completely. And that's going to change the dynamic of a lot of the other stories. So I got to go back and rework those. And some of those pages I might be able to use. But like with this new issue, all the pages are brand new. They're not from the old series at all, because it wouldn't work. It just didn't flow with the storyline and stuff like that. So that, to answer your question, probably 4, because I handle all the tasks.
Now, what else do you have in the works? I mean, we've seen you, I think you're wearing it now too, the shirt, but do you have anything we haven't seen? Do you have a coloring book, a Stickman coloring book, or do you have anything that anything else you could show us and tell us about? And what, you know,
Not without, you know, undoing the mic and digging out a bunch of stuff. And these
um,
are all the, these are, well, I mean, that's a sketch. I don't know if you could see it. That's kind of what I'm working on right now.
yeah, yeah.
So this is actually the legendary Captain Buck Naked.
Oh yes, yeah.
That's awesome, dude.
Legendary.
Oh, you talked about, aren't you? Don't you have a story of his that is going to be in something? Maybe it's a backup feature or something where you're going to.
That's actually, that was good. If we, you know, one of the things I want to do with the campaign was create the different stretch goals, and that was, I was going to add an additional 16 pages to the comic, and that's the backup story that I was going to tell of the 16 pages of his, because he does show up in issue number 4. So because people haven't seen him in the first 3 issues that came out, he was just referenced. He you know, again, he's the hero, he's the champion. He's since
He's who
retired.
Stickman idolizes, also.
And there's, you know, a funny interaction that I've got with Stickman, that he modeled his outfit when he finally meets Buck Naked. He modeled his outfit after him, and his outfit doesn't look anything like Buck Naked. You know, it's like,
Right.
don't look anything like me, kind of thing. And it's just, well, you know, I got the gloves, I got the boots, but they don't look anything like it. So just typical when you meet your heroes. But the one of the backstories that's being told is the story of Al, the little alien sidekick. On the campaign, you've got the comic, and then you have a thing I'm calling the Behind the Branch, which is, it's not a you see a lot of people, they offer like a sketchbook as well. It's so much more than that. It's like the behind the scenes of the DVD, but more along the lines of like what Lord of the Rings did, in-depth documentary, commentary. There's going to be links that you'll be able to go out to that are interactive with documentary videos, and you know, all kinds of stuff in there. But it includes the 8-page story of this character and why he's so cool, because he's just cool, and he knows everybody, and everybody knows him. And how did he end up with Stickman of all people? How is he the, you know, the sidekick for this bumbling buffoon kind of thing? And how does he keep him? Why does he even bother with them, kind of thing? And that's covered in that 8-page story. That and along the lines, you know, not really, well, kind of a spoiler alert, but Al doesn't say anything in the comics. He never talks. So I wanted to approach it kind of the way you mentioned Larry Hama, and what he did with, what was it, G.I. Joe number 21, the silent interlude, which was just a comic, you know, with no words. The story that the standoff with Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, and he did it just visually, and I think people will get a kick out of it when they see all the stuff of what this little alien guy's every little part. You talking about doing reference to history, having to go back and look at all these different key moments in history that Al was there for, kind of thing, and helped guide and steer and do all these things. So he's this really cool character, and it's one of the things a lot of people used to ask me about. So I wanted to include this 8-page story that's only available in that book. It's not going to be published anywhere else. And then again, the story with Buck Naked, why he retired, what was there's been this reference to the offensive that was, you know, this big battle that took place, and it's going to kind of tell the story behind that too. So
I think the Wolf has a question, or he wants you to expand upon. So go ahead.
Well, first off, that you just gave me a great idea right there. That inspired that documentary concept. I think it'd be very interesting to see in the minds of the creator some of the concepts that he's coming up with that maybe did not make it into the final draft, and have that as a stretch goal and as a perk. And interestingly enough, you're talking about the perks and merchandise and t-shirts, and how much that fans really like to get a hold of this extra stuff, because when a fan becomes a fan, they want to be involved more with what's going on. And I think that is an important part. That is the fan base. So maybe you can expand on the power of the fan base and how the creator interacts with that, especially on this new medium we have. Okay.
That's a great question, because that is where the so-called professionals have really dropped the ball. The idea that you would malign anyone that, you know, doesn't like what you did. Oh my goodness. You know, could you imagine if when Coke rolled out with their new recipe, if they attacked everybody who said this is awesome?
Guys, sorry to interrupt you guys, but I have to go. I have to go do the Jordan Quartered now.
All right.
Have fun. Tell everybody I said hi.
I will. Thanks a lot, Johnny. Nice to talk to you again, man.
We'll
Thanks,
talk
Chester.
again soon, Chester.
All right, guys. Later.
Later.
But you think about that. Imagine if Coke had come out and said, "You people are crazy. You people just don't know what you're talking about. You people are racists and bigots and homophobes and whatever else because this secret recipe was created by a very diverse culture of people." I mean, come on. Could you imagine? But what they do, they said, "Oops, we made a mistake. Okay, we're going to bring out classic Coke. We're going to keep this for the people that do like it, but we're going to do classic Coke." So, but instead, when somebody says, "I really didn't like that story," and you got to understand that the fan base of comics is unlike any other fan base out there. They will sit there and say, I really didn't like that story. I thought the artwork was subpar. I'm going to give them 8 more issues and then I'm off it. That's it. I'm done. I'm hitting the road. And you have an opportunity to bring that fan back in for 8 months. Now think about the damage that these so-called professionals did, that they chased those kind of people away, that loyalty of that fan base that just said, what, I didn't like that. Can you do better? But instead I'm going to attack you and I'm going to malign you. And if you don't like it, it's because you're this, 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 and this. I'm like, no, I just didn't like it. Just because I criticize somebody doesn't mean I'm this, 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 and this. And so as an independent, you need to appreciate every single fan, every single person. You think about how flattered, and it just, like myself, I'm not better than anybody else, but how flattered I was that I got my first piece of fan mail. Somebody took time out of their day to sit down and write me a letter. How amazing is that? You were thinking of me while you wrote this letter to tell me what you thought, good, bad, or indifferent. I called my newsletter section "Sticks and Stones." I didn't care. I wanted to hear it all. Good, bad, or different. Tell me what you like.
Smart, very smart.
Yeah,
I like
I want to hear it all, and I'll address. And I had mentioned to you earlier about lettering. I had somebody bring up in a letter saying that he had trouble following some of the word balloons. I'm like, yeah, I agree with you, man. Lettering is an entirely different animal. It's an art form all in itself, and it takes a while to really get a hold of that. And I'm still working and learning, but I appreciate your criticism and I appreciate your letter. And I think that's missing. I saw this. I want to say it was like 4 or 5 years ago. I went to the Comic-Con here. I'm in Tucson. I went to the Tucson Comic-Con. And I walked around, and the attitude of these creators was just, it was deplorable. It was, you got somebody like Brian Pulido was there. And I think Brian Pulido is the co-owner of the show now. But Brian Pulido from Lady Death, I've known since the 90s. And Brian, as gracious as can be, as humble as can be, talking to everybody who came up to talk to him. And you compare that with all these people that want to produce their book, standing there stinking their all that, and being very dismissive of people just because they're coming up and they're asking questions or they're not buying their book right away. And you need to respect the fans. You need to appreciate that somebody, if they buy your book, that's hard-earned money. That's their money that they're putting out to buy your book. And that's one of the things I always wanted to make sure that I did the best that I possibly could. I wanted everybody's dollar, every dollar they spent, that it was worth everything that they paid for it. Maybe they didn't enjoy it that much, but at least they knew they had a book that somebody took a lot of time with, and they put a lot of it, and they did it in a way to where they appreciated the fans. Okay. And I think that's something that's missing. And I think the indies can recapture that. We really can. And maybe you're not good. Maybe you're not good at talking to people. Maybe you're introverted, which a lot of artists are. That's fine. It's funny. I used to be accused of being the face man of the company all the time. People find out I was the actual creator and artist. They're like, "Oh wow, yeah, I thought you were just the carnival barker here behind the."
You come across very well, so I can see how that would happen.
Well, it's like shy and timid are two things that have never been used to describe me. Okay, and I love talking to people, and unfortunately, sometimes a little too much. And at the shows, I could never do sketches or drawings for people because I was always talking with everybody. I just didn't have time to sit down and do the drawings.
Right.
But maybe you're not good at that, but somebody who is. You have a friend that's good at talking to people. Bring that person with you. Okay, when you do these shows that I talk about, make the commitment, pull the trigger, put the money down, get the table, go to the show. If you're not good at talking to people, bring somebody in who is. Because I'll tell you what, if I come up to your booth and I say, "Tell me about your comic," and you're like, "Well, it's like this, and I think it's cool," and I'll be like, "Well, okay, if you're not excited about your comic, I'm not excited about your comic." And I'm sorry, but I appreciate you sharing that with me. And then you're going to move on to the next one. So it's nothing against you. If that's not your skill set, that's fine. But I know somebody who can do that. Okay. I know you have a friend or a relative who can come in and who can help sell this book for you, help create the energy around your book. You know, when you're famous, when everybody knows about your book, you can sit in the back, you could be the brooding artist the entire time. That's fine. But right now, you got to get that story. You got to get it out. You got to tell people about your stuff. So
Yeah.
write about your book and interact with everybody that you can. Okay, even the ones who smell really bad at the conventions, you got to interact with them too. Okay, I don't understand that. I mean, in America, especially at the cons, you're in the hotel room. You could use the shower, but okay, interact with everybody and appreciate the fact that somebody is coming up to talk to you. And if somebody has some negatives, here's a little tip. If somebody has something negative to say about your book, say you get a negative review.
Right.
And the funny thing about my books, there were a couple of reviews. They weren't negative, but there were a couple little negative little nits in it. It had nothing to do with the book itself. It had to do with the fact I'm a Christian. And so I mentioned Jesus I think I dedicated one of the books to Jesus. And in the back, thank you for reading this comic kind of thing, I mentioned him there too. And the person's like, I don't like being preached to in my comic. And it's like, dude, all I did was mention his name, but it's like, okay, so you just let that roll over you. But say you get a negative review. Here's a little tip. It's kind of funny. You can actually grab, you think about, you see these movies that are bad, but they've got these quotes. It's like thrill ride for the ages kind of thing. Well, they left off the part of the quote that said thrill ride for the ages if you want to be thrown up for the rest of your life kind of thing. So leave that back part off and just, stick that first part that it's an incredible book, and all the negative stuff you can kind of leave off. You're still quoting them. It's just you're kind of leaving off the negative stuff. So a little tip there to kind of help encourage you that, art is subjective. Not everybody's going to like your stuff. People are going to attack you for whatever reason. Just let it go. Keep pushing forward, or use it as a learning experience and do better next time. Don't attack them. Take constructive criticism, uses that, even if it's just harsh and negative, just constructive criticism, and do better. Thank them for taking the time to come up and share something with you. That would be my advice. I mean, I see it missing, and it's a shame. I mean, you hear about the people in Hollywood, like Paul Walker was considered one of the good guys in Hollywood because he loved all his fans. Look at what, Taylor Swift, I don't agree with, I don't even listen to her music, but she loves her fans. She interacts with her fans. And I think if she just had one fan, she'd be that way with her fans.
I was going to say something that is akin to that. What you're saying is you come across a lot like Stanley, Todd McFarlane. You have 3 issues, right? And they came out 9 years ago. But your enthusiasm matches theirs. Your enthusiasm is very much like when McFarlane gets on stage or he does his little quirky videos, and he's only drawing a head or a bust or whatever it is, but the enthusiasm just pours out of him because he does love this. He does love his fans. He does love, I mean, granted, he's a good salesman, and you are as well. But enthusiasm is passion. Passion breeds fans. It breeds the base. Without them, that's the part that I'm trying to sort of get. When you say, "Oh, build a channel, build this, build your base," I'm like, okay, every time I'm out, I got to be enthusiastic. I got to show the people that 1, I know what I'm talking about. 2, I enjoy this. 2, I love this. 3, I want to engage you. I want to talk to you, and you do that so well. And that's that. There's something to that, and I think that's why certain people are successful when it comes to breaking away and being independent, and why others aren't. No matter how talented they are, it's how they come across. You've been to these, like you said, you've been to these conventions before, and there's a certain type of person that sells himself really well. And then there's a certain type of person who looks like he's sitting back there with his board and he's brooding because, oh God, I got to do this. I got to draw this. And it's sort of the same type of thing when I went to conventions in the 90s and I was dressed like a gym teacher and I was able to go behind the table and sit next to the editor and show my work. Whereas the guy who was super talented but wearing a Dr. Martens and a duster jacket and, maybe he had a mohawk, whatever, he just was not what they were looking for, because you're selling a company image, and even though the company has changed and their politics are involved, they're still selling an image. Right now, I'm not sure about that image, but they're still selling wholesomeness to a degree. You know, and I think there's something key about that. But even if you did look like that, right? Even if you had the mohawk and the duster jacket and the Dr. Martens, enthusiasm and passion will win you a bunch of fans. Agree?
I agree, 100%. And you know that goes to, and by the way, thank you for those compliments. Those are wonderful. I hope I can live up to them. The the thing that enthusiasm, that's what I was talking about, especially at the shows. If you're not good at engaging with people, because you know, I got to tell you, and you know, if they may be listening to this at another time. The guys that I first met, these other independent guys, I think in had to be, you know, 2005, 2006. They were at Texas at one of the conventions, and they did this comic called Some Big Lumberjack. And, you know, their enthusiasm about the book, I just, you know, they gave me a copy, but I wanted to buy it. And I was telling everybody about it. And, you know, what's funny, the stories that they told and their enthusiasm, some of the stuff they told about the book wasn't even in the book. But it sounded so good that I felt like I actually read that in the book because they were so excited about it. And they would bring a lot of people over to their booth, and you had two different guys. You know, Chris was a little quieter, and Tom, man, he was the carnival barker. He could get anybody over to the table. But those two guys really sold their book. And you need to have that passion, that enthusiasm. You need to have that to get people excited about your stuff. Because you'll have people, and maybe they don't even like it, but you know what? They like you, and they'll buy it because of you. And they're buying you with the product. And this is, you know, a lot of people, I don't have really any experience in sales and stuff. And all sales is just, it's a conversation of moving people from one position to another, a place of indecision to a place where they made their decision. That's all sales is. And if you can convince me that you've put your passion into this book, I'm going to buy the book. Okay. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to buy your artwork. There's something behind you. And again, if you can't do it, bring in a friend that's going to do it. And just the main thing is just don't lose yourself. Don't forget you're selling an image, you're selling a brand. It would behoove you to, again, bathe if you're going to be behind the booth, uh, dress. You know, you look at somebody like Rob Liefeld, who's been around forever, and I know Rob. Um, every time you see him at the booth, he doesn't look like Schlepperock back behind there.
Right. Still a jeans and polo kind of guy, or t-shirt kind of guy, yeah.
Exactly. And, you know, Todd McFarlane, another one. You know, Todd and I mentioned this to you earlier when we were talking. We had up at the Phoenix Con years ago, that it was the first time all the image creators had come together. And I got invited to the dinner where they were at, as well as the after party. And I was like, well, I just draw these little stick figures. What am I doing here at the table with all these guys, right? And at the after party, Tom McFarlane and I had a conversation that I really wish to this day. And he's just up in Phoenix. And I kind of mentioned something to him a few years back about maybe re-recording our conversation, because I wish we had recorded that. It was a conversation of being a creative person, what it takes to be kind of like the conversation that we're having here, what it takes to be a creative person, and the marketing side from his experience in the time of image, and then me bringing in the new media. So bringing in the electronic side of things and bringing in using, you know, believe it or not, at the time, nobody was really using email marketing. I was one of the only people that you would see collecting email addresses at these shows. And I couldn't even believe Marvel wasn't doing this kind of stuff, because you had an audience there that were willing to give up that information for something kind of thing. And you know, the reason why you do that is you can continue to communicate with these people, and you can communicate. You know, I had somebody come up to me in Seattle, and he's like, you know, okay, I'm going to buy your book. I said, do you know about it? He's like, yeah, I've been getting your email for a year. I might as well finally buy the thing. And that's how you continue to stay in touch with people. You send out a newsletter, tell everybody what's happening, and you'll end up getting those sales and stuff. And so in talking with Todd about that, and maybe you said I remind you of kind of that same enthusiasm, maybe that's why we hit it off so well, and why we spent the whole time talking. Now, you know, funny thing at that dinner, just real quick, kind of a side note, has nothing to do with the creative, but being at that dinner was so much fun. The waiter comes out, and he sits down my plate in front of me, and on his arm he's got this tattoo of a character from the 10th, of Tony Daniels' The 10th comic book. And I'm like, oh, do you like comics? Like, oh, I love comics. So I see you're an Image Comics fan. He's like, yeah. I said, do you have any idea who's in the room right now? He's like, no. And I just went around and said, that's Todd McFarlane, that's Eric Larson, that's Rob Liefeld, that's Mark Silvestri. And the dude's freaking out, right? He's just freaking out. And he goes and he tells the owner. So the owner comes out and wants to meet all these guys and everything. And then it was a small little restaurant that we were at. And he thought it'd be cool to bring out a plate. So he had all these plates come out and he gave it to all us artists that were sitting there, and he had everybody draw something on the plates. And so there's a restaurant, I don't know if it's still there, but a restaurant up in Phoenix who had all these original Tom McFarlane, Mark Silvestri, and little kind of thing. But the funny thing is, Jim Lee, instead of a plate, he has to have a platter. And Jim's like 4 foot nothing kind of thing. He's just tiny little dude.
Right.
So I turned to Jim Valentino. I said, "Do you think he's compensating for something?" And the war was on that night. This is the first time I've ever met Jim Lee, and the whole night we spent the night trading barbs back and forth. So at dinner, at the after party, and that was my experience with him. It's just constant, just who can one up the other on the little put downs and stuff like that. So it just and again, this is where you kind of, as an independent creator, these opportunities open up for you, and you can't. You're just like, wow, how did I get here? This is so cool to be here. Sadly, I see too many independents that are like, I deserve to be here, and guess what? They're not invited back. When you're in Chicago and you get waved to the table with George Perez and Billy Tucci, and hey Johnny, come on over, and it's just like, okay, I'll come on over and say hi. If I sit back here, is that okay? I'll just hide back here in the corner. Like, no, come on up. And you're sitting and you have these opportunities because if you can be open and honest and genuine with everybody, and you can appreciate the fact that you're given an opportunity that a lot of people would love to have, and I'm thankful for all the opportunities and all the people that I've met. That's going to go. It's going to show. It's going to show to everybody around you. It's going to show to your fans, and you will get fans. But if you mistreat them, take a look at what Marvel's doing. Okay, take a look at what DC's doing. They're mistreating their fans. They really are, and they're blaming their sales on the fans when it's their fault. They don't do that. If your book's not doing well, it's not the fans' fault. It's not their fault that they're not buying it, and they just don't know good art. Maybe something needs to change. Look at it critically and say, would I buy this? This is, the pricing on it. Maybe the pricing's too high if your book's
Right.
That's something you got to think about too. Something you might want to consider if you're trying to get your name out there. Do something in business is what's called a loss leader. Okay, where you sell something a lot cheaper than you can produce it for, or you give it away for free, knowing that you're going to make it up on the back end. So for instance, right now, Burger King has this great promo going out with an app that you will get a 10-cent Big Mac if you use their app, but you have to go to a McDonald's for the app to unlock the 10-cent, not a Big Mac, a Whopper, to unlock a 10-cent Whopper. So they're saying, go to McDonald's to get your 10-cent Whopper. Okay. Now, the Whopper is going to cost them more than 10 cents to make, but it's going to drive you into Burger King to get your 10-cent Whopper, but you're going to buy a Coke. Okay. You're probably going to buy some fries. Most people are. So they're going to make that money back on the other stuff that they're going to upsell you on. Okay. So if you look at where I would see the mistake of independent creators when they price their stuff. Now, nowadays, there's no excuse to really put together kind of a Kinko's copy comic with print on demand. You can create some. I mean, even what Kablam, you can do a one-off comic for $3, $3.50, whatever. So price it either what it costs you or a little bit less. Okay, but I would see these creators, they do these hand-created stuff at Kinko's, and I commend them because they got this stuff out there. But they price it at $7, $9, $10 for this one comic. Okay, and you got to ask yourself, would I pay $7, $9, $10 for this comic? Honestly, would I pay that? Look at it, step outside of it, and look at it objectively. Say, would I really pay that? And what they're looking at is like, well, I sold a comic and I made $7. But think about this: if you mark them down to $1, you could sell 7 comics, and instead of one person talking about your comic, you now got 7 people talking about it. And chances are they're going to spread the word and share it with other people, especially if it's good. Okay? Or think about giving away for free. Now, I don't really put much stock in free because when people get things for free, they tend not to appreciate them. So if they invest a little bit, 50 cents or $1, something like that, they're more apt to read it and appreciate it a lot more. And again, but you could do it in a way, like I said, collecting emails. So you say, okay, I'll sell it to you for $1, but I need your email address. Now you can follow up with them at a later date. You can follow up, hey, what do you think of the comic? I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me what you think. Give me your insights. Any, good, bad, or indifferent. Tell me what I could do better. What do you think I need work on? And use that information and run with that, and then create your stuff around that. And then you'll have testimonials in those emails that come back to you that you'll be able to use at a future date for your comic. Like so-and-so wrote this. Kind of think about your comic. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
No,
some
right.
of your best some of your best marketers can actually be your fans. You got fans out here that once they get it, their hands on something, or they get to know you, what they want to promote you. Then, you know, actually Fanspeak itself, and you're on Fanspeak. I'm a regular contributor there. We came about through the idea that we wanted to help promote. We wanted to be the cheerleaders. Once you get a cheerleader involved, you can almost let them go on a leash, you know, as long as you will vet them. Once again, like you're talking about before, about you know, making yourself look good, make sure they actually represent you well. If they represent you well, take that fan, and where you're not supposed to feed the bears, you can feed these fans, right? Give them the little extras, and help them out, you know, spur them on, because that word of mouth from that fan, because he's going to go out or she's going to go out over and over and over. And something else you talked about was having the spokesperson. I helped raise a foster child, and this particular person, she was on the robotics team, and she's in engineering now. But at the time, she didn't know anything about the robot. And it was like it had to move around and do things, you know, and compete. There were these engineer guys that they built it, but they weren't interesting. And she was there on the team because she had been through what is that? Kind of like a finishing school type course, right? So she knew how to present herself and knew how to market something else. She learned about the robot. Of course, she got interested in engineering herself in the process, but they had someone who then presented the material well and was excited and exuberant about it, while the engineer kids got to sit over there and charge batteries, right? So that's what you want to be able to do. If you don't have that ability, go out there, find that person, find that cheerleader, and bring them in, you know. And you see the big guys do it all the time, and they have literally, you know, dressed to the T cheerleaders, if you will.
That's the thing with price your book. You could be missing out on that cheerleader if your book is priced, you know, too high, or if you're not interacting with the fans, or if you're standoffish, or you don't present yourself. Now, I'm not saying you have to, you know, as far as an appearance, that you have to. I mean, we're artists, we're creative people, we're a little different, or a little quirky, so you know, you don't have to be dressed to the nines. You just make yourself a little more presentable. You don't want to have a ripped up shirt and stuff. Now, when you become the famous artist, that could be your shtick. That could be your thing. You know, that you've got the mohawk and the Doc Martens on, and the, you know, the duster and stuff. That could be your thing. But when you're trying to get the word out there, presentation is everything. It's so important, and it's not hard to still be yourself, but you know, just present yourself in a way that is approachable. It's the best way to put it. I mean, you know, like with me, I'm all about branding. So I've got, you know, the STKMAN logo. We had stuff everywhere. I'm all about branding and marketing, and get the word out there of your book any way that you can. And that's, so, you know, T-shirts, collared shirts, you know, we had, you know, I actually had dress shirts that were made up. So when we do some of the after parties and stuff like that, that way people always came up and like, oh, STKMAN. Okay. Yeah, I've heard about that kind of thing. So that's why I do that with it, because it's always branding, always marketing, always keeping stuff out there. In fact, I used to write a column for Wizard magazine when they were around. It was called Independent Insights, and one of them was on branding. It was called Brand Standing. It was about really getting the word out, and it helped out a lot of creators. And if you think along that way, so you've got something that, you know, you are your comic, and you need to, any way that you can. You can't always afford all the different merchandise and the shirts and the hats and all that kind of stuff. But if there's a, you know, you can make bookmarks. You can do something that has your logo on there, something to kind of get the word out. Bookmarks don't cost you, $50. You can make 500 bookmarks, and you can hand those out at a convention. You know, I mean, think about, you know, I know money is tight for a lot of people, but just kind of think about what you can cut back your coffee, your daily Starbucks that you're spending $3 to $5 on. Can you cut that back for a little bit, and use that money on you know, things like that, promote your book and everything. Constantly think of new ways to get the word out about your book. Now, one of the stories, people used to, I haven't told this in years, but I used to, when I was sitting on the panels, and it was one of the panels, sharing information. One of the Wizard was the big magazine at the time. Wizard noticed your book. You know, that was golden. It was everywhere. They didn't really cover independence that often, but and this will help people to think about how you can get the word out, and how you can maybe use social media to do this too. But I was trying to figure out how do I get Wizard to notice me. And most people go the route of, okay, well, you take your book and then you send it off to others and you write a little and say, here, read my book. And the editor takes your book and then they put it on the stack over here to get to. And then they get a whole new shipment of books and here, read my book. And they take those books and they put those on top of yours. And then they get more books and they put them on top of those. And they take that stack and they just kind of throw it in the trash. Unfortunately, there's too much stuff for them to see. So how can I make myself stand out and make my comic stand out? And again, this is the days before social media, and I don't have the big budget of the Fortune 500 companies. So what I did is I called Wizard Magazine, and the gal who answered the phone, I asked, is there a pizza place that you guys know or that you guys use regularly? Like, oh, yeah, it's, let's just say Joe's Pizza just down the street kind of thing. I said, great. When is your next company meeting? Well, it just so happens that tomorrow we're having our company meeting, and we're all going to be meeting. I said, great. So I actually, this was on a Wednesday that I called. It was a Friday. They were having their company meeting. And so I called over the pizza place and I asked them, if I FedEx you copies of my comic book, will you attach those to the top of the pizza that I order for this company and then deliver them to Wizard Magazine? Like, oh, sure, we'd be happy to do that. So I took copies of my comic and I put a little note in there and they're basically saying, pizza's on me today. And if, here's a little light reading for you while you're eating your pizza. And I sent those to Wizard Magazine. They delivered them to the break room where the staff meeting was going on. Later on that day, I get a phone call from the editors over at Wizard Magazine saying, hey, first, thanks for the pizza. And second, everybody around here is talking about your book, but unfortunately, everybody took the copies home. Could you send us some more copies? So that now, who doesn't want a phone call like that, right? I'm like, absolutely. They're in the mail to you today. You'll have them by tomorrow. And
Nice.
that's how I got on Wizard's radar. That's how I got noticed. That's me sticking my hand up saying, hey, notice me. And if they don't notice me, I'm not going to put my hand down and go sit in the corner. I'm going to say, no, notice me. I'm going to put both hands up now. Notice me, pay attention to me. And honestly, guys, independent creators, that's what it's going to take. You don't have to go the route with the pizza. You can accomplish that stuff with social media. You have an opportunity to reach people in a way that just wasn't there before, that you would have had to spend a fortune. We talk about interacting with fans. Now you create a Facebook page, and you can interact with people. You create a group. You can interact with your fans in the group. Before, you didn't get a chance. This is so great that we can do this kind of stuff. 10 years ago, you had to, fellow creators, we only met at the conventions. That's the only time we had a chance to really say hey to everybody and reconnect. And that's what made the after party so great, is you finally have a chance to see all your playmates again. Because you don't get a chance to. You go sit, you're at the convention and you go sit behind your table. But now you have a chance to do these hangouts with your fans, which is awesome. Bring them all on, invite them on, and say, hey guys, ask me anything you want. Make it fun by showing artwork. Like I've got going in like the behind the branch, unused character designs. So this is the way the character originally looked. This is how he ends up looking now, or she looks now. This is a concept that we were running with, but now I'm going to go in a different direction here, so that people can, because I love the behind the scenes stuff, and if you get a chance to pull back the curtain and people can see how all this stuff is done, I'm game. I mean, that would be the only reason why I bought a DVD, is because I get to see some of the stuff on it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I kind of rambled there again, but it's the stuff to get people kind of thinking. Think outside the box. You hear that all the time, but unfortunately, nobody ever really tells you where the box is. And like, I want to think outside the box, but somebody tell me where it's at, or where the box keeps moving on you. And you're
Right.
like, next thing you know, you're in the middle of this, and it's like, well, okay, somebody show me. And this is the kind of stuff that look outside of comics for ideas. Believe it or not, there's plenty of books out there on how to promote your book. Quit thinking just comic books, okay? We get very myopic and we think about learning how to do comics, but there's other ways to do things. There's other ways to promote things. Like I mentioned earlier about the crowdfunding, I went to a guy who made board games to read about how he did his crowdfunding campaigns. That's not comics, but it still applies the same. And the same thing with book promotions or promoting branding or stuff like that. Look outside of that and figure out ways how you can use that knowledge. Because most of the time, these things are promote your book on a budget or promote your book for free, or do some ways that you can use the internet to kind of spread the word to get this stuff out there that would have cost you a fortune before. And that's the beauty of the internet. It leveled the playing field. All this stuff that was only affordable to the deep pockets and the Fortune 500 companies is now available to all of us. We can now get the word out, interact with, excuse me, with our fans and with people that might be, and potential fans and people who might be interested with what you have to offer. If that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. It's something we preach about and talk about a lot on all the channels that I'm interacting with, especially in Chester's channel. We actually look at campaigns or Indiegogo, and I wouldn't say scrutinize, but we go over things and we look at placement and what you did right, and we try to offer what you did wrong. And we talked about this before we got going about just listening and understanding. We want to help you because there, you know, and especially, for instance, again, I talk a little bit about uh, on Fanspeak a little bit about things that don't look ready. They're not quite up to snuff yet. And it may be that the art is great, but the coloring is bad. It's not, there's no theory being used. There's no focal, you know, you're not using color to focus. You're not coloring warm to cold or cold to warm. You're just coloring straight up as if everything is in a certain kind of light. And that's not, that may be what your reality looks like, but that's not how you do comics to tell a story, because ultimately you're using color and color theory to tell a story. And so people don't, you know, you're not in ambient light 24/7, you know. And so your scenes and your things need to sort of be colored. And so when you color just the night sky blue but none of the people blue, then you've completely lost me. You know what I mean? So that's the idea behind certain types of comics and how they're colored and stuff like that. And we talk a lot about that. We try to help people. A lot of people on Fanspeak, there's a panel of 5 or 6, 7 people all the time, and the ideas are great. And like you mentioned, it's just getting people to listen and realize our interests are we want you to succeed. You succeed, then you become a fan of ours, and then like DeWolf said, you start spreading the word. Well, Fanspeak is helping us out. Fanspeak has some people who are willing to talk about marketing. They're willing to talk about this. They're willing to talk about that. They go through the steps, the stages. They know what a successful campaign looks like and what it doesn't look like. And you know, you would think people would be asking us to come on Fanspeak, and that's still yet to happen. But I think eventually it will.
I don't doubt that. You know, I mean, the main thing is I think what's missing, and there's a local creative group that's starting to meet up here in the Tucson area, which is kind of cool to see. That of fellow creators that are coming together to try and help one another out. And I think what's missing, and I saw this start to happen 10 years ago, and then the different conventions I would go to of people not being there for one another, and not in the pettiness and the infighting that happens between creators is just so silly. We're all in it together, okay? So the idea that I'm afraid to promote something that you're doing because that might take away my readership, that's just silly, okay? That we're independents are going to be the future of this industry. If the big guys continue to go the route they're going, okay, and we talked about this on another show, that if they don't smarten up and if they continue to lose readership and retailers go under, if we lose another 100 to 200 retail shops, there's no way Diamond can keep things going. There's no way. That part of the industry will implode, and then it's going to be the secondary market. And the secondary market, you know, in secondary I mean direct to consumers kind of thing. So that's where the independents are going to shine. And we need to be helping one another out. We need to be sharing this information. If I've got knowledge from my experiences that I can share with you to help you create a better comic or enjoy your experience in comics better, because that's important. Believe me, once you get, and speaking from experience, once you get jaded towards this industry, it takes a long time to come back. It took me 10 years. I finally said, you know, enough, I got to walk away. And I walked away because that attitude was coming across in the panels that I would sit on when people would ask me questions, that that slight tinge of disappointment would bleed into the stuff I was trying to share with them, and I felt myself keeping them, you know, instead of inspiring them, I was actually holding them back, and I didn't want to stand in the way of anybody's dreams. I didn't want to do that, and it was time to kind of pull back a little bit from the industry. And once it gets in there, And there, you know, there's another guy here in Tucson, the same thing. He had to leave for 2 years. He walked away from the industry, didn't do anything creative for that very reason, because the infighting and the backbiting and the unwillingness to share or build up or even lend a little constructive criticism to people, that's done away with. We all got to work together. We're all
Oh
in this.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like,
The thing about what's going
with other people, and especially in the chat too, and anybody else who listens to this, let's work together. Let's cross promote. Let's hold each other up. There's no reason to tear each other down. There's not. Okay, it's just it's silly, you know. And if again, art is subjective, so the idea that you're going to lose a readership because you referred somebody over to another book, well, you know, so what? You know, so what? At least you helped a fellow creator out, and maybe that creator is on the fast track to stardom, and you feel like you've been doing this a lot longer. The best thing you can do is support them, get behind them, give them another push to get them up there. Okay, things happen for a reason. You know, even like Todd McFarlane, he did. I saw a behind the scenes or an interview with him recently that was really good. I'll have to find that and share that. It was, you know, somebody talking about that a lot of the stuff happens. Luck plays an important factor in a lot of this stuff. So, you know, chance meeting and luck and, you know, whatever, you know, and your ability, you know, again, all the stuff that we talked about before, you're doing all that, but then you just happen to meet the right person. You just happen to hit it off. You know, I met Stanley once. I met him in an elevator, and he looked through my portfolio. One of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. And I never have a chance to ever show my portfolio to Stan Lee, but we happen to be in the elevator together. And he's like, oh, you know, let me take a look at your stuff, you know, and you're feeling like you're 3 feet tall, shorter than he is, even though I'm 6'2", and, you know, outweigh the man by a good 60 pounds plus, you know, so it's like, you know, but you feel like a little kid when you have this experience. So again, a chance meeting, a chance opportunity if those things happen, you know, so and this could happen to somebody that you know. Maybe they met the right person. Maybe the right person just happened to look at what they were doing. Maybe the right editor saw their artwork at the time they needed that particular style, and that caused them to, you know, take off like a rocket. Who knows? But to be bitter about it, to be angry about it, no, just keep producing your books, man. Just keep doing your thing. Keep being creative and support that person all that you can. Because you never know. If you continue to support that person, maybe something's going to open up where they need what you're doing, and that person can reach down and lift you up into that stratosphere as well. But if you burn that bridge, it's never going to happen for you. Just my thought.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something going on now that before you had Marvel and DC, right? And they're kind of button heads because you have one company and another company. Now with independents are kind of their own large company, if you will, of singular individuals. Because as one company, say, well I'll choose Marvel, right? As Marvel becomes popular and more people want to buy Marvel comics, same thing happens with the independents. If an independent comic comes out and I'm interested in it, I'm now a new reader, possibly a new reader, possibly an old reader, or a reader of Marvel. And now I've discovered independence. Now you become an independent reader. So you want to buy more independents. So the more each of the creators actually support each other, you're actually growing a base of readership, because there's not a singular piece of the pie that we all try to get a piece of the pie. There's always more pie being made, which means more money out there to be literal, more money out there to buy your product. There's always more of it. People are going to work. People are getting jobs. You're getting paychecks. It's always going to happen. And so there's someone else that's going to be out there to buy. So when you support him and they buy his book, then they come around and you support them and they buy his book. You put out your book because there's a lag time, like you were saying, 4 months or 3 months for your book to come out. Now your book is out, and now they're going to support your book because they're interested in the media, and that's something that's happening these days. And the media is changing, because you said something very interesting about how it's not a comic book, you know, especially with the Indiegogo projects. They're more like they're graphic novels. Well, if you go into a bookstore nowadays, you go to any bookstore, it is lined up shelf after shelf after shelf with name after name that spans the globe of names. And yet those authors are out there, they're putting books out, the bookstores are putting them on the shelf, and they're selling, you know.
Yeah, well, you know, and it goes back to this industry and the fan base and how loyal the fan base is and stuff. If they want what you're producing, they'll buy it. They'll figure out a
Mhm.
way to get it. Okay. They'll cut corners somewhere else because they like what you produce. Not only what you produce, but they like supporting you. And that's where, again, the independents have something that the big faceless companies don't have. Okay. Is that they're not just investing in your comic, they're investing in you too. And so if they like what you're doing, if they like you as an individual, they will find a way. And so if you help promote another independent, if they go buy that independent's book, it doesn't mean they're going to stop following you and what you're producing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, and again, the industry is going to grow. It's going to help. You know, really, I think the independents are doing some crazy, amazing things. Why else would these so-called professionals be attacking with both barrels right now?
Right,
What
right.
are they worried about? What are they afraid for? You know, why are they being so dismissive? Anytime, you know, in any movement, it's like, oh, don't worry about them. I mean, again, being a Christian, just think about to the early, oh, don't worry about those Christians, man. We don't have to worry about them. And then poof, it just spread everywhere. So the same thing with Marvel's kind of, you know, pay no attention to them kind of thing. We're Marvel, we're DC, we do all kind of thing. And just like, yeah, but look
That
what
reminds me. That reminds me of Casada in his latest comments about sales and how books that they triple shipped were in the top 5. Nobody, yeah, but okay, now Spider Geddon this and Spider Geddon that, whatever. These 2 books were in the top 5, but I went to the store and they're sitting there. They were overshipped. They were given copies more than they ordered, and they're just sitting there. Nobody's interested in those books. So you can say that those 2 books made it to the top 5, but there's a reason.
Mhm.
And you bullied the system. And you know what? You keep bullying the system and then going on Twitter and shouting, oh, we did this, we did that. And then you look and you go further down and you look, Amazing Spider-Man #5 by Ryan Otley, who you couldn't wait to bring over after he was done with Invincible, which Invincible was a good book. It's sold in the top 20 all the time. You brought him here, and he's doing this crazy Spider-Man, you know, but it sold 2,100 copies.
Hmm.
That's it.
Mm.
2,100 copies of
That's
Amazing Spider-Man never happened in history before. I looked, never happened. Spider-Man never sold that low, ever. Didn't matter who was on it or who was doing it. It was the worst sold issue so far, and now it's not going to get any better. Now you're going to tell me you're not scared, and that's why you're saying we're in the top 5. You're scared. You're absolutely scared.
I can see that. You know, I mean, and that's, you know, the word for that is shenanigans in what they're doing. And yeah, and you see that, you know, it's just kind of like, you know, and you talk to these retailers and they talk about the games that are being played. If you want this particular issue, you got to order so many copies of this, whether they sell those issues or not. And this is stuff that's killing the retailers because they got to invest in these books that they don't want, that aren't going to sell, in order to get this one particular one that might sell. And, you know, it's just, it's too much of a burden for them to continue to bear. And I feel bad for the retailers. You know, I have no intention of, you know, in full disclosure, I have no intention of putting Stickman in the retail shops. I've been there. It's and I understand as an independent, you want to get your book on a retail shelf. It's really cool to kind of go there and walk down and see your book on the shelf. And it's just like being in Diamond. You know, it's cool to see your book in Diamond. Although I will discourage you with every fiber of my being to not go that route. It's not needed. Okay, just for that so-called feather in a cap. You know, your book is what it is, and it's going to sell and it's going to resonate with people. You don't need diamonds. Okay, and we could talk about that at a later date. We covered it on the other show, but we can talk about
Right,
that. But you don't need it now. You really don't. They're irrelevant. Especially for an independent. So, you know, with the retailers, I'd say I was only in probably close to 50% of retail shops. So there were, you know, a little over 50% of the retailers who didn't support my book the first time around. So I really have no interest in putting it back on the shelf. But the retailers, you know, honestly, I do feel for them because they're in the business and they're the things that kind of, you know, help keep this industry alive. The industry will keep going without them. If the diamond machine apparatus collapses and the retail shops have to close up, it's going to survive. It will. It'll morph into something else. Okay, and again, it'll probably end up in more of a direct to consumer approach, kind of like the crowdfunding kind of thing. You know, where you
or
don't
a
have to
print on demand kind of approach.
yeah, exactly. So you'll
Yeah.
see that, and we're not going to go completely digital. There's just no way because people, it's just like they said, the books are going to be done when the Kindles come out and stuff like that.
What's that saying Stanley had about you like to look at a at a pair of boobies, but you really want to hold them in your hand, right?
Stan.
I want you to take us out with your best P.T. Barnum sales pitch of Stickman. Give us the last pitch, and when we're done, don't go anywhere because I do have something more I want to tell you, but we'll go off the air with your last pitch.
Okay, so the last pitch, as far as what Stickman is, but I mean, the main thing is just to tell you about the character. If you like Saturday morning cartoons, okay, if you're a fan of Looney Tunes, if you like stories of the bumbling buffoon who basically good guy beats up on bad guy, wrecks half the city in the process, still manages to save the day and get the girl, Stickman is your comic for you, okay? He's an arrogant, not so bright hero, because we need one more. He rides around on a souped-up big wheel. He has a little alien enigmatic sidekick who actually ends up saving the day most of the time for him. His heart is always in the right place in trying to do that thing. He's like the one friend that everybody has that thinks he's really good at something, but he's really not, okay? That is Stickman. Stickman is trying to follow in the footsteps of the legendary Captain Buck Naked. And as, the world watched in disbelief as this man stepped down, the evildoers raised their hands and they were excited because there was a time that evildoers everywhere used to cower with fear when authorities would cry, "Let's get naked." But now it's not there. Okay, now it's up to other hero wannabes who want to fill that void, and that's Stickman trying to fill that void. In the new issue of Stickman, he's going against General Sod the Dirt Clod, who is the embodiment of evil, if you will. He was the byproduct of a fertilizer. What would be the best way to put it? Of a mishap with radioactive fertilizer byproduct called phylogypsum sludge, blended with the aspartame inside of a Coca-Cola or a Diet Coke.
Wow.
So those two come together and it forms General Sod the Dirt Clod. He is, instead of having somebody who's rock solid like the Thing, he's falling apart over time. So he's like a dirt clod. You pick it up and a few pieces fall off. So he has to stay hydrated all the time. He has a little sidekick called Nicodemus who carries around a little squirt bottle with him. So when a little piece falls off, he goes over and sticks them back together and smooths them all up and keeps them in one place. So next episode, I have, it's a sticks and stones kind of thing. You got General Sod against him. You also have Sidekick versus Toady. And who's going to come out on that one? So you got Al versus Nicodemus, and how's that fight going to go down as well? And then you have by far probably one of the most, if I don't mind patting myself on the back, one of the most creative takedowns ever portrayed in comics. That I don't think anybody's going to see this coming. So that's Stickman. Now, one thing I want to say that I just added to, actually, I haven't added it to the page yet, but it will be there. Everybody who backs the campaign is not only going to get, regardless of what level you back it at, you're not just going to get the 4th issue, you're going to get issues 1, 2, and 3 also in digital format. If I had enough copies of the physical copies of issue 1, 2, and 3 left, I'd give everybody a physical copy, but I think I only have 20 issues of issue number 3 left, and probably less than that of 2, and a handful of issue number 1. So I can't fulfill that, but I can give them digital copies. So you're getting 4 comics for backing at any tier. And you're also getting an issue number 1. I had mentioned earlier about the 5 missing pages to get the comic ready for Comic-Con. You're going to get the director's cut, if you will, of issue number 1. It's going to have those pages put back in. So the comic's going to end the way that it was supposed to. A little over 10 years ago, 10 plus years ago. So can't make it any sweeter than that.
I can't get the money through the camera to you, sir.
Johnny, we really appreciate you coming on my show. You're an incredible interview. I knew you would have a lot of wisdom on this game, and I love your hustle and grind. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate the invite, guys. Thank you for having me. I hope I didn't blab too much and take up too much.
No. Stick around for a second as we go out. I want to thank everyone who watches this show. Appreciate all you fans liking the video. This is a show that I did for you guys. I really wanted you guys to know, as creators, there's a good way, in a bad way, and a wrong way, and a right way. And he brought you a lot of wisdom on doing it the right way. So I hope you'll watch this and take what you can from it. We'll do more of these. Thank you very much. Take care.
Have a good night, guys.